Rico, hey, congratulations. Thank you for speaking to us, on this very important month of Hispanic Heritage Month.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Now, for those people who don't know, who is Rico?
Oh my gosh, it's just a Puerto Rican raised in Pittsburgh, thriving in Denver, and now I have multiple shows on HGTV. It's 0 to 100. It's been pretty crazy. I grew up in a very blue collar area with very blue collar, hardworking parents, so it brewed me into a monster.
So, how did you get into this construction business in the first place? Were your parents in that industry before, or you stumbled it into yourself?
Yeah, definitely. Like my dad was a chemical engineer. He was like A+ student the whole way, did 8 years of college. My mom, same thing, like straight A student. She went to college and she became like, more of a housewife. They were never into construction. When I was younger, my mom accidentally kind of caught the kitchen on fire. And that was the first time I ever saw like a construction person in my house. Long story short, that person kind of screwed over my parents. This was when I was like 13, 14. I'm 36 now. That was the first instance I ever got when it came to anything construction. But when I worked at Roto-Rooter in Pittsburgh, it was a lot of like demo cleaning, asbestos, mold, sewage, which not fun, not sexy. But construction came after. So I was in charge of managing the people that would come after the devastation. And that's kind of my foot in the door in the industry. I was never like, I want to build houses. That was never the thing. But I was really good at managing people in the industry. And that's where it started to come about.
So, so at which point in your life you wanted to start a construction business? Was it at Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania? Is it what we're talking about?
No, no, it was Pittsburgh gave me a lot of the knowledge. The reason I started my own company is because I worked for so many companies that were so horrible. Like they had so much overhead that if they had a bad month or bad 6 months, they wouldn't care about taking care of the homeowner. They would be like, let's fire a bunch of people, let's not pay things out so then we could keep the lights on. So I got into the industry. I did very well, was selling millions of dollars worth of work. I was managing beautifully. But what made me start my own business was how I saw how other people did business and I hated it. Like I hated it. Like they had so much overhead. They treated people like a dollar versus humans. And when I spoke up about it, they were not fans of it. They're like, we'd rather you be part of the team, shut up and sell versus like say anything. So when that was going on, I remember selling like $4 or $5 million worth of work. I had like $200,000 in commissions coming my way. So I was like, this is like the first time I'd ever make like, oh my gosh, money. And they fired me before I could collect that money. And legally, they could fire me. I had to be an employee before I could collect. So that was probably my second epiphany in my entire life where I was like, this is so unfair. But I realized at that moment, I will never work for a human being again. I had to do it myself. I knew the process. I knew the system. I knew to not have too much overhead. And of course, like that's where the Rico Extra came from, is because I was making so much money. I didn't have any overhead. So I was like, when families were going through tough times, I was like, hey, this sucks. So why don't I'm going to upgrade your kitchen $10,000 on top of insurance. Upgrade that adds more value to your house. Same thing with your primary bathroom, but be cool during this whole bad process. And it really worked out for me. But that my starting my own business is because I got screwed out of a lot of money. Like I got screwed out of money. I was working for people that were not good people. And that's when I made that mental shift.
So how did you basically move from Pittsburgh to end up in Denver today? I mean, what about that city of Denver that you wanted to, lay your foundation in?
Well, that's what's funny. Denver wasn't even in my top 15. I was my go-to places were LA, Miami, New York, Austin. Denver was not even in my vicinity. Like it wasn't in my thing. I was actually heading to LA, and my car broke down in Denver. Like I was forced to stay in Denver. I was like, oh, I don't smoke weed, I don't ski, but like why would I be in Denver? But when I broke down here, a friend of mine from high school, Becca, she let me stay with her, and it was the first time probably in my career of life that I wasn't working. So I had like a month or two while my vehicle was getting fixed where I enjoyed an area versus like working every day. And then of course, like everyone else, fell in love with Colorado. There's so much sun here. There's a misconception. Everyone thinks it's cold all the time. It's not. It's beautiful all the time. And then fell in love with Denver. And then I really fell in love when I kind of started working and I realized like everyone here is like a beautiful work-life balance. Mm-hmm. And me, work, and no balance. So that East Coast work ethic works out very well here in Denver. Like you could excel very quickly by having that mindset. So it was never on the list. I fell in love with Colorado accidentally.
So you started your business in Colorado itself, and then at which point, because your face is showing up on HGTV quite a bit. At which point you made an arrangement with HGTV? Did you approach them or they approach you for this?
So a producer was planning on doing a show in Denver, like a real estate show. And my friend Berkeley, very attractive realtor, as all realtors do, they want a show, right? I was like anti-TV. I don't want to be on TV at all. And she asked me to get interviewed because I used to consult a lot of insurance agents and realtors. So then they would send me construction work. So like she knew that I knew the language. She's like, hey, can you like get interviewed by this production company to maybe potentially make a show? I was mostly doing it for her as a favor. Like, cool, let's do it. And when the producer interviewed me, he realized like I have a company that has like 1 million 5-star reviews. I speak Spanish. I'm okay looking. Like he just kind of pieced all these little things together. And then he kind of fully focused on making like a promo sizzle reel and then showing HGTV. And then that's where they picked it up. And it's been 0 to 100 since.
So it's one of those things that's just fascinating because your show like Rico to the Rescue, it's great. It's because for some of us we don't usually see too many honest contractors out there, and you want to help out these people and more.
Yeah, well, it's helping out the homeowners for sure. There's a language they don't understand. Like if a guy that works on cars says, "Oh, you need this," you're thinking, "I don't know. I just assume and trust you because I don't know. I don't speak car." It's the same thing with construction, and I speak both homeowner and contractor fluently. And it's not just the homeowners they need to know better; it's the contractors themselves because there's a lot of honest contractors that make a lot of mistakes. So it's not just like teaching the homeowner what to do and not do. It's also teaching the contractor processes, systems. There's a way to go about it where you don't screw yourself, where you can still be honest and get things done. And I want to help both sides out than just one side.
Now you work fairly quickly, in my opinion, on the show. Could you tell us about the team that you actually assemble for your show that you like to work with? I mean, where you initiated the relationship and how long you had this team that you found yourself with?
Yeah, these are people I've worked with for a very, very long time. I would say the only person I never really worked with a long time was Poonam, who's a designer. I usually have never worked with a designer before, but before then, I was in charge of subcontracting for the previous company. So I met 1,000 contractors that told me the same thing. So I did a lot of very expensive trial and error. Like, let me see you work. So out of 100 contractors, there was like 3 that I liked. So when I started my company, I had those 3 work for me right away. And I said, hey, prioritize my work. and then we're all symbiotic. So that's how I've been batting 1,000, is because I went through the gambit. But it's I've been very lucky because of that. But it's the expensive trial and error is the reason why I'm very proficient. Like you, if you and your significant other want to do a $200,000 renovation to your house, you're not doing that 8 times. You're doing that like one time, right? So you have one shot to hire one guy to hope that this one guy does well. I was able to give 100 jobs to 100 different contractors and then see if they were good or not. So I was very lucky in that aspect of it. But I like to work slower and have milestones and be more communicative. So then it's easier than having 800 jobs where I'm so busy that I can't answer a phone call. Like less is more in my realm. And I think with Denver blowing up so quickly, a lot of people just were selling versus realizing how to manage money, how to be proficient with the time. And I think that's the biggest like detriment was the pandemic. Like they were bidding things pre-pandemic. During the pandemic, it takes 12 months versus 6 months. So you have a contractor that's spending 6 more months on mortgage, car payment, on their kids, and then the math doesn't work out. And then it's either they tell a homeowner, hey, I'm doing this for free, or they got to tell a homeowner this is going to cost $100,000 more. Now the homeowner's upset. So there's a huge miscommunication just because of the timelines of how things grew and how things slowed down as well in different aspects.
So when things do go wrong, things do go wrong. It's just that we don't see it on television, do we?
Well, no, I mean, what I love about my show is that it's real. Like we have to go through a situation that homeowners are actually going through. It's not like, oh, my wife massages butterflies and I sell paint cans on eBay and we have $1.9 million spent on a house. We are in situations where someone got $150,000 stolen from them. Mm. So what do you do? Like, do you use your entire life savings? Do you call your friends and family and ask them for money? Do you get another loan? Like these are real true life scenarios that's what I like to focus on, because it's not sexy to talk about insurance. But if you know how to work insurance and file a certain claim, make sure the claim gets approved and get $50,000 back from a contractor that didn't do correct work, that saves your family. Not sexy, but guess what? These are the things that people need to learn. So then if anything goes wrong, they know how to go about it.
So who chooses the subjects for your show, Rico to the Rescue? Is it your producers or you're part of it, and how do you vet them?
So I mean, after my first season, I got about a trillion emails. Like I got a million emails from Hawaii to Nashville to Florida because of the hurricanes, to Houston because of the hail, the fly-by-night roofing guys there, to California. I mean, you name it. Everyone's like a degree away from a contractor situation. So when that came out, I had a million scenarios and a million people reach out. I have a staff that makes the phone calls, that like vets the people to make like, because we've had phone calls of people saying things that were not true. Right. There's just people saying like, oh, I was screwed up, and that's not, and we found out it wasn't the case. So there needs to be a high level of due diligence to make sure it's real, the situation, how much a homeowner has left. Like there's a lot of questions that they have to answer before we know what we can do.
Wow. So any chance you want to take it outside of Denver one of these days, or for now you just want to stick to home base?
No, I know as a fact that season 3, I would want to go. Like I personally would love to go back to my hometown, back in Pittsburgh. I got a billion people in Pittsburgh dealing with it. I have people in Florida dealing with it. I have, there's celebrities that are dealing with it, that are asking for my help. So I feel like the next season I would like to expand, because Colorado has certain laws, good and bad, right? And that's not the same in New York, not the same in Hawaii. Like it's a different way to go about it. So it would be very challenging, but it's something that I feel like I would be very proficient at. So I would love to go out of state, the next season, but we'll see.
Well, let's go back to your heritage. After all, it is Hispanic Heritage Month. Tell us how the the Puerto Rican culture has affected your life while you're growing up.
Well, it's interesting because when I grew up in Pittsburgh, there was no Latinos. There's very few Latinos. So I didn't have family in Pittsburgh. So my friends or my parents, they found friends that were from Venezuela, Colombia, Mexico. They found these people and they're like, hey, you know what? Our family's not gonna fly. All of our family's not gonna fly in. So why don't we do Thanksgiving at our house? So that's like one of my fondest memories is having Thanksgiving. Our house was the house. My dad made friends with so many people, but we had like 10 different countries, 10 different cultures, all speaking Spanish, like at my house. So I was very lucky because as first generation Latino parents, they were worried about like how I would be treated being the only Latino in my school. They were worried about it, like they were like, hey, should we not teach them Spanish? Should we not like push it too far? And I was very blessed because a lot of my parents' friends, they were like, speak English, blend in, be part of the whole, American culture. Like we want to make sure that you fit in. And my parents like kind of stuck to their guns and they made sure that I spoke Spanish, danced Spanish, cooked Spanish. We spoke Spanish at home. And I at the time it didn't make sense because there's no one speaking Spanish. But then as I grew up, I look back, I'm like, thank God I speak Spanish fluently. Thank God I have the food and the culture still involved because if they weren't strong about it inside the household, then I would have lost it.
I was gonna say, because I had a lot of friends who are first generation, and their parents would not teach them Spanish because they want them fully integrated. And you,
Correct.
with the show, you managed to leverage that to an advantage too.
Yeah, growing up, I was like, why do I need to know Spanish? Like, why am I speaking Spanish at home? I was like, and my parents like made sure I kept that up. And then when my car broke down in Denver, and I realized, oh my gosh, so many people speak Spanish. So then I started speaking Spanish every day, and I realized like when I have clients that speak Spanish, I speak insurance fluently and I speak construction fluently, which is different than just speaking Spanish. So like it worked out beautifully when it comes to the career, but in life in general, which at the time growing up in Pittsburgh, speaking Spanish doesn't really get you anything, you know? So it when I came to Denver, I was like, oh my gosh, 30% of Denver, it's like they speak Spanish. So it made a lot of sense when I came here. And I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, thank God my parents like stuck it in and kept it going.
Well, I'm not going to throw you a curveball, but it's funny is because when I was trying to Google you, and the very first thing that pops up is like, is Rico single? But anyways, we're not going to talk about that. But I was informed that you are quite a cook too.
Oh my gosh. I'm the only child. So being the only child, the mom's gonna teach like you're gonna get a lot from the mom, a lot from the dad. So I think cooking is very intimate. Like I think when someone cooks for you, like if you think about the love languages, right? Like, acts of service and like time spent. Like I think cooking is a lot of the love languages in one. So it's a very intimate thing, like cooking for somebody and cooking with people. Like I do for Hispanic Heritage Month, I do get all my friends, Latino and not Latino, to find a Latino dish, cook it from scratch, can't buy it. I'm not going to tell you what everyone else is bringing, but you have to bring it here and you got to serve it. Sometimes it's the same dish 4 times in a row and we do a little competition, but it's I think food like cooking is very intimate. I think the kitchen is intimate. So I'm glad again that my parents kind of like taught me all the things because for me, I mean, I'm working a little bit too much to cook these days, but if I do have friends and family over, I definitely cook.
So what is the favorite Latino dish you love to cook?
So my favorite would have to be mofongo. I don't know if you know what mofongo is. It's like the least sexiest word of all time. But mofongo, like we cook a lot with plantains.
Mhm.
So we mash plantains up, we add bacon, we add onions to it. And then we cook like langosta, which is like lobster, like steak, minced steak, and chicken. And you could serve it so many different ways. And then in Puerto Rico, we do mayo ketchup, which is like half ketchup, half mayo. It doesn't, again, it doesn't sound good, but if you don't knock it till you try, because if you mix the two, it's like this like very like light orange sauce, and it's so delicious. And I miss that. I like that's the one thing I remember like loving the most, and still cooking to this day. But there's other people out there that definitely cook it a lot better than I, that's for sure.
I can't wait one of these days when HGTV and Food Network, do a crossover with contractors doing a cooking show or something.
Oh, they will. They've already, Food Network's already reaching out, so you might see that sooner than you think.
Well, that's terrific. And tell us, is season 2 already completely done, or you're currently still filming and proceeding through some of the contract work?
Yeah, so season two's about like we're about like less than a month away from finishing up the last 2 houses. So we've done a lot of the houses, done a lot of the reveals. This season has been way more spicier than season 1. And I honestly thought I've seen it all until this season. And I always try to meet in the middle, right? I speak contractor. There's good guys out there made some mistakes. There's homeowners that make mistakes too. But this season, I've seen things that I've never seen before, and I've had to reach out to more people for help to make it happen, which is it's a lot of work. It's not an easy show to do. I mean, like you see a lot of shows where it's like, we have 500,000. What's our, what can we get? It's like people say we had 300,000 and we lost 150. What can we do to get our family back home? So it's definitely more challenging, but I'm impressed to see how we've combat that and still won. And it really takes a village. It's not just myself. It takes a lot.
Excellent. And if I look at my notes right, you have a talk radio show too for yourself, or is that incorrect?
So I've done a bunch of like podcast stuff like that. I wanted to do like a podcast myself. Not really don't have the time, but I've had, since my show came out, I had a lot of Latinos reach out to me. Ones that just wanted to start their own company that got inspired, which is like phenomenal, all the way to like Mark Anthony reaching out, flying me to Miami, telling me about his nonprofit, which is Maestro Cares, where he like builds these community centers for like, underprivileged children, which I'm like, it's so aligned. But because of the show, so many people have reached out, which has started a lot of beautiful ventures. One of them is Latino Millionaires Club, where because Latinos, we have like very strict parents that are very old school, like, work 9 to 5, go to college and die with a credit score of 845 and whatever, like, and not horrible advice, but, it made being entrepreneurial a little bit harder. So Michael Valdez, who works for EXP Realty, and I decided to start Latino Millionaires Club, which is a podcast strictly based on like Latinos of every culture, but of every position and work. So we could hear successful stories and maybe change the mindset of Latinos growing up, so then they could feel like they could do a lot more than work in the 9 to 5. So we're doing that right now. And of course, like with my very demanding schedule, it's very hard to have my own podcast, but I'm definitely trying to contribute as much as possible.
Well, terrific. Well, Rico, I've taken a lot of your time already, but let me end it with one last thought, because as an inspiration to a lot of Latinos and Hispanics out there, how do you feel about this? Representing, in the business community on television, over through podcasts and organizations. How do you feel about this position and being in that position to inspire other Latinos and Hispanics?
I love it. I've done, like, looking back, I did the hardest thing in the world, which is just doing the right thing every time. There's been so many times I could have profited a lot more. There's so many times that I could just gone a different route, not done the wrong like right thing, and made more money. And looking back, I'm so glad I did the hardest thing. So what I would like to do is inspire more Latinos to do the same thing, which it is harder. it is harder to do things the right way. I could always like cut corners and do this kind of stuff, but I don't feel like setting that as president is good. I mean, I even go to like the Hispanic chamber out here in Denver, and I go, I don't like how any of this is. Like I just don't like it. I feel like they're always trying to collect money and do this and whatever. I was like, why are Latinos not supporting Latinos by just helping each other out versus like asking for money all the time? Like there's things I don't like either. So I think a lot of Latinos you know, see that and see that better representation, and that's kind of my fuel. And like I grew up being a Boy Scout. When I say Boy Scout, I'm like no drugs, no none of this, like no controversy. I'm not doing anything like that. And I feel like it's I'm setting precedent into a better way that people see our culture, and I want to keep that going, you know, versus any the opposite.
Well, whatever you're doing it successfully, and you
Thank
have a hit show and a terrific successful business. Rico, thank you very much for carrying
Thanks
into
for having me. It.
in-depth conversation. Hopefully, we get to do this again down the
I
road.
will love it all the time. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.